Hello, my name is Abigail Griffin. I am an undergraduate student at the University of Central Oklahoma, majoring in women's gender and sexuality studies with a dual minor in German and creative writing. This research was conducted in fulfillment of the requirements of the Rights and Reproduction course under my degree. Considerable neglect of reproductive rights of transgender women and men. Discrimination against transgender women and men is not a new development or concern. However, today more space has been carved out to expand the visibility of targeted abuses against transgender women and men and the blatant disregard of their rights. This is not to say that our work as a community is done. Though there are still many issues to be reconciled regarding transgender individuals, this paper will focus solely on the reproductive rights that are grossly infringed upon both nationally and in Europe. In addition to the blatant disregard of transgender women and men as genuine members of society, they are forced to undergo sex reassignment surgery to update their gender markers on federal documents, required to consent to sterilization to complete surgery, infantilized and stereotyped as mentally ill. They are not offered any alternative reproductive measures across the United States and are forced to bear the financial weight of these medical requirements. These are gross offenses against inherent human rights. An individual's gender identity should not be a basis for infringement of these rights. Transgender women and men should be trusted with their own identity and the expression of it and afforded the same rights as cisgender women and men. To begin to understand the issues moving forward, one must maintain social literacy. In the interest of clarification, there is a need to provide updated definitions of terms used in this paper that are often disregarded. 1. Sex. 2. Gender identity. 3. Gender expression. 4. Gender transition. And 5. Transgender. Sex is a label assigned by a doctor at birth, male or female, determined by your genitals and chromosomes. Gender identity is one's innermost understanding of the self as male, female, both, or neither. This can differ from the sex a person is assigned at birth. Gender expression is the external performance of one's gender identity. Gender transition is the process by which an individual seeks to align their internal understanding of their gender with their external appearance. Some individuals socially transition by way of using different names and pronouns, dressing and grooming differently, and/or changing identity documents to become socially recognized as another gender, while others choose to physically transition by modifying their bodies with hormone replacement therapy and/or medical procedures. Transgender refers to an individual whose gender identity and/or expression conflicts with the sex assigned to them at birth. This term is often shortened to trans. It is important to note that the definition of transgender does not rely on social and/or physical gender transition. United States and European identity document laws and policies. Identity document policies and laws are left up to the discretion of each state. This leaves transgender women and men in a consistently precarious position. Maintaining precise and consistent gender markers on identity documents helps to ensure that transgender people have access to public spaces and resources and dramatically reduces the risk of violence, discrimination, or harassment against them. According to the equality maps of the Movement Advancement Project, currently 9 states and 2 territories require proof of surgery, court order, or amended birth certificate to update the gender marker on a driver's license. They are Alabama, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Georgia, Guam, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. 4 states and 2 territories have undefined, unknown, or unwritten policies for gender marker changes. Although other states do not require surgery, 23 states and 1 territory still require the certification of a medical provider. In regards to updating birth certificates, Idaho, Ohio, and Tennessee do not allow gender markers to be amended. 16 states and 2 territories require sex reassignment surgery to update the gender marker on an individual's birth certificate. They are Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Georgia, Guam, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Michigan, Missouri, New Hampshire, Nebraska, North Carolina, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. Again, 4 states and 2 territories have undefined, unknown, or unwritten policies for gender marker changes. 6 states are unclear regarding surgical and/or clinical requirements and/or may require a court order to change gender markers. It is common for many transgender women and men to change their legal names to better support their gender identities. Even legal name changes pose potentially detrimental roadblocks to transgender individuals. 11 states and 4 territories require the publication of a name change announcement, typically in a local newspaper. 23 states have unclear publication requirements or leave the requirement to the discretion of individual courts. These requirements pose financial hardships and threats of harm, harassment, and discrimination. Additionally, 25 states have further restrictions for those with a criminal record. In 2017, the European Court of Human Rights determined that sterilization requirements for legal gender recognition violated human rights. This meant that the remaining 20 European countries subjecting citizens to forced sterilization were required to change their laws, and that countries planning new gender recognition laws should not include any infertility requirement. However, the case that brought about this determination, AP and others versus France, did not determine this forced medical examinations and mental health diagnoses constituted infringement of human rights. At the time, transgender people in 36 European countries continued to be oppressed by mandatory mental health diagnoses in regards to gender recognition laws. This still persists as a violation of human rights since it assumes transgender people have a mental illness. Rather than recognizing that individuals have the agency to self-identify, Europe still seeks to pathologize their identities. According to the Trans Rights Europe Map 2018, 34 countries still require a mental health diagnosis before legal documents can be amended. Legal gender recognition should be based solely on individual self-determination. These requirements violate an individual's right to self-determine their gender identity. Furthermore, it infantilizes transgender women and men while exacerbating stigma, exclusion, and discrimination. It suggests the false contention that being transgender is a mental illness. Transgender medical procedures and hormone replacement therapy. There are a variety of procedures transgender women and men can undergo in order to align their sex with their gender identity. Options available to transgender women include hormone replacement therapy via estrogen, breast implants, tracheal shave or Adam's apple reduction, penectomy or removal of penis, orchiectomy or removal of the testicles, and vaginoplasty, creation of a vagina. Options available for transgender men include hormone therapy via testosterone, bilateral mastectomy and reconstruction or top surgery, hysterectomy or removal of uterus and other internal pelvic organs, and phalloplasty, the creation of a penis. Sex reassignment surgery is not one size fits all and should be altered for each individual in response to their personal gender dysphoric needs. We must also recognize that not every transgender individual wishes to complete all, if any, medical procedures, and forcing them to do so in order to achieve legal validity is unethical. If one does choose sex reassignment surgery, a consent to sterilization form is completed by the physician, patient, and if necessary, an interpreter. One key component of the verbiage of the consent form is that it puts all the responsibility on the patient. The patient must attest that they have asked for and received information about sterilization from their doctor and that it is their decision to reject alternatives such as birth control. Transgender women and men forfeit their potential desire to reproduce in exchange for getting gatekeeping medical professionals to approve medical transition procedures required by United States law. A survey posed by the International Journal of Transgenderism shows that 51% of transgender women wish that they had preserved their fertility before their transition. Additionally, there remains a lack of policy support for transgender people to preserve their fertility before hormone therapies and gender-confirming surgeries. Often, patients are not fully informed of their reproductive options before moving forward with physical transitions, and not every patient is ready to consider their potential desire for reproduction at the time they are required to transition. In the event that fertility preservation options are mentioned, the expense can be a deterrent, especially in addition to the expenses of medical treatment. Egg freezing patients on average will spend $30,000 to $40,000 on treatment and storage. Sperm cryopreservation runs around $500 to $1,000 to deposit sperm and have it processed so it can be frozen, with an additional cost of $1,200 a year to store it. If an individual is not offered these options or simply cannot afford them, they risk never having the option of reproducing. Cost and coverage of sex reassignment surgery. Although some health insurance providers in the United States are now covering only the portion of sex reassignment surgery that alters the genitals, they remain the minority. The expense of transitioning can exceed $100,000 in the United States. According to the Movement Advancement Project's Healthcare Laws and Policies map, 31 states and 4 territories have no LGBTQ inclusive insurance protections for private insurance institutions. State Medicaid policy explicitly excludes transgender health coverage and care in 10 states. 19 states and 4 territories have no state Medicaid policy explicitly regarding transgender coverage and care. 12 states explicitly exclude transition-related healthcare in their state employee health benefits. 21 states and 5 territories do not include transgender and transition-related healthcare in their state employee health benefits. Inequality in access to healthcare and health outcomes are especially severe for transgender women and men. A significant number of transgender women and men, especially transgender people of color, or Black transgender people, refrain from seeking health care because of the cost. As stated before, this creates an issue when sex reassignment surgery is required to legally update gender markers. Regardless of any transgender individual's preferences regarding completion of sex reassignment surgery or abstaining from it, they should not be forced to barter the potential of children for a legally valid status in society. Transgender women and men should be afforded the same human rights that cisgender women and men are given freely. This includes the safety from infantilization and pathologization of their gender identities. Discrimination in access to medical coverage and availability should not determine their ability to complete sex reassignment surgery. Likewise, it should not determine their ability to preserve their eggs or sperm. Providing accessible healthcare will subsequently decrease the expense. Transgender women and men should be allowed the same agency as cisgender women and men regarding their gender identities and expression. Access to proper healthcare should not come at the expense of forced and/or coerced sterilization, mental health assessments, and financial hardship.